The young millionaire entered the wrong car. She thought it was a robbery, but what she did shocked him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The rain fell in silver lines across the dark glass of the parking garage, each drop echoing softly against the concrete walls. The city above was still alive, horns, lights, the hum of traffic, but down here, it felt like another world. Ellis sat in her old silver sedan, hands gripping the steering wheel, waiting for her last delivery of the night. The clock on the dashboard blinked 11:47 p.m. Her tank was almost empty, her eyelids heavy, and her stomach growled louder than the radio's static. She had been driving for 14 hours straight, saving every dollar she could to keep her car from being repossessed next week. Outside, a man in a dark suit hurried through the rain. The echo of his shoes on wet concrete grew louder, faster. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his coat clinging to him like a shadow. Without warning, he pulled the passenger door open and slid inside, his voice low but firm. "Drive, now." Mara froze. Her heart slammed in her chest. The smell of rain and cologne filled the small space. For a split second she thought, "Oh my God, this is a robbery." "Excuse me?" she stammered, glancing sideways. The man's jaw was tight, his blue eyes focused straight ahead. "Please," he said, his tone rough but not cruel. "Just drive." Fear took over before logic could. Mara slammed her foot on the gas. The tires screeched, water splashing behind them as the car shot out of the parking lot. Her pulse raced faster than the windshield wipers. "What do you want, my wallet, the car?" she shouted, voice trembling. The man blinked, startled. "Wait, what? No, don't lie. I saw movies like this," she snapped, taking a hard turn onto Main Street. The man threw up his hands. "Stop the car. I think there has been a mistake." But Mara was already halfway to panic. "A mistake? You literally jumped into my car and yelled at me to drive." Finally, at a red light, she slammed on the brakes. The car jerked. Both of them breathed hard, the rain beating against the windshield like a drum. The man exhaled, running a hand through his soaked hair. "This is not my car." "Kamzatsis, what?" He pointed outside, across the street, where a nearly identical black sedan sat idling by the curb, same make, same model, but with a driver holding an umbrella, looking around in confusion. Mara blinked. "You have got to be kidding me." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, unexpectedly, the man laughed a soft, disbelieving laugh that broke the tension like a warm light. "I am so sorry," he said between breaths. "I thought you were my driver." "I just came from He stopped, catching himself. "From a meeting." Mara's grip loosened on the steering wheel, her fear shifting into stunned annoyance. "You do not say? You nearly gave me a heart attack." He smiled awkwardly, his voice low. "You are right. That was terrible of me. Let me make it up to you." "I think you have done enough, Mr. Wrong Car," she muttered, half under her breath. He chuckled again, the sound genuine this time. "Fair." "My name is Grant," he said, extending a hand that was still damp with rain. She hesitated, then shook it briefly. "Mara." As their hands met, a strange calm settled between them, brief, wordless but real. The rain softened outside, and for the first time that night, Mara almost smiled. Grant glanced at her worn sketchbook lying on the passenger seat between them, its corners soaked but carefully protected. "You draw?" he asked. "Yeah," she said quietly. "When I am not accidentally kidnapping strangers," he grinned. "Then tonight I guess we both made mistakes." Outside, the city lights glowed through the drizzle. Two strangers, one wrong car, and a story that was only just beginning. The next morning the rain had stopped, but the city streets still glistened under a pale gray sky. Ellis pulled her car into the gas station, rubbing her eyes after another sleepless night. Her mind kept replaying the scene from last night, the stranger, the mistake, the laughter that had somehow chased away her fear. She shook her head, muttering to herself, "Only me. Things like that only happen to me." Across town, Grant Hale stood by the tall glass window of his office on the 42nd floor. The skyline of Manhattan stretched before him, sharp and dazzling, yet his thoughts were elsewhere. He had faced investors, lawsuits, and press scandals, but none of those left him as unsettled as one woman with paint on her hands and a cracked phone in her lap. He could still hear her voice trembling when she said, "You literally jumped into my car." A small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. When his assistant, Clara, entered with his schedule, he barely looked up. "Cancel the meeting with the board," he said suddenly. "Sir, that is the quarterly review," she replied. "I am aware," he said, his eyes still on the window. "Move it to tomorrow." He did not explain further. Grant Hale was not known for impulsive decisions, but something about Mara felt different, real, unfiltered, alive. Later that afternoon, Mara parked outside the Hale Industries building, unaware that she was about to see him again. She was there for a food delivery, her last order before heading home. The lobby was massive, marble floors reflecting light like water, and people moved like clockwork, polished, efficient, distant. She waited at the reception desk, clutching the takeout bag. Then a familiar voice behind her said softly, "I was hoping it would be you." She turned, startled. There he was, dry this time, dressed in a tailored suit instead of a rain-soaked coat. Grant Hale looked every bit the man he had accidentally pretended not to be: calm, confident, and unmistakably out of her world. "Oh, you again," she said, raising an eyebrow. "You planning to hijack another car today?" Grant laughed quietly. "No, I came to apologize properly." He gestured toward the nearby cafe inside the lobby. "At least let me buy you coffee. No rain, no panic this time." Mara hesitated, glancing at the time on her phone. She had another shift waiting, but curiosity outweighed exhaustion. "Fine, one coffee. Then I have to go back to being a responsible adult." They sat near the window, the hum of city life muffled behind the glass. The conversation began awkwardly, but soon turned easy. He asked about her art, and she told him about her dream van project, a traveling art studio she hoped to build one day for underprivileged kids. He listened closely, his usual corporate demeanor softening with every word. "It sounds ambitious," he said gently. "What is stopping you?" Mara laughed under her breath. "Reality, money, time, the usual." Grant looked at her for a long moment. "Sometimes all it takes is one person who believes in it." She blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity in his tone. "And you are volunteering?" He smiled faintly. "I might surprise you." When her phone buzzed with a new delivery alert, she stood reluctantly. "Duty calls. Thanks for the coffee, Mr. Wrong Car." "Great." He rose with her. "Grant," he corrected softly, "and I hope this is not the last time we meet." Mara hesitated, then grinned. "Depends. Try not to chase my car next time." He laughed again as she walked away, her steps quick but light, leaving the faint scent of rain and coffee behind her. As the glass doors closed, Grant watched her go, a quiet thought forming in his mind. For years, he had built things: companies, systems, empires, but last night, by accident, he had stepped into something that felt like the beginning of a story, not another deal. He turned to Clara, who had been waiting nearby. "Find out everything you can about the driver named Mara Ellis," he said calmly. Clara blinked. "Sir, may I ask why?" Grant's eyes followed the reflection of Mara's car fading into traffic. "Because sometimes the best mistakes are the ones worth repeating." Quote. That evening, Mara Ellis sat cross-legged on the floor of her small apartment in Brooklyn. The hum of traffic came through the thin walls, mixing with the low sound of a radio playing an old pop song. Around her were sheets of paper, half-finished sketches, and empty coffee cups. She had spent the past hour staring at her phone, debating whether to open the message that had come from an unfamiliar number. "This is Grant Hale. Thank you for the conversation today. I meant what I said about your art. If you ever need a hand professional advice, not another car ride, call me." Mara read it 3 times. She had no idea how a man like him even got her number. Maybe through the company database, maybe through magic. She laughed quietly, shaking her head. "Yeah, right," she whispered to herself. "Like a billionaire CEO has time for my doodles." The sketchbook on the table caught her eye. On the open page was a drawing she had made earlier that afternoon, a van covered in painted stars and children's handprints, her dream of a traveling art studio. She ran her fingers over the pencil lines, thinking about his words. Sometimes, all it takes is one person who believes in it. The next morning, she went back to work. The city moved fast, and Mara followed its rhythm: coffee deliveries, rides to the airport, groceries to uptown apartments. She was tired but content. Life, for the first time in months, felt like it was moving somewhere. That afternoon, her phone rang while she was refueling her car. The number again. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Mara Ellis?" The voice on the other end was calm, professional. "This is Clara Dunn, assistant to Mr. Hale. Mr. Hale would like to invite you to a small art showcase tomorrow evening at the Riverside Conservatory. He thought you might enjoy it." Mara frowned, caught between suspicion and curiosity. "I think you have the wrong person." "I do not, Miss Ellis," Clara replied politely. "He said to tell you it is not a setup, only an apology for nearly terrifying you in the parking garage." Mara exhaled a laugh. "He really said that?" "Yes, ma'am. He also said the dress code is whatever makes you feel like yourself." The next evening, she arrived at the Riverside Conservatory, unsure why she had agreed to come. The venue glowed with warm light reflecting off the river. She wore a simple blue dress she had bought at a thrift store and repaired herself. When she stepped inside, she felt instantly out of place. Guests in designer suits, waiters carrying trays of champagne, a live quartet playing softly in the background. She was turning toward the exit when a familiar voice stopped her. "You showed up?" Grant said from behind her. He looked nothing like the exhausted man who had jumped into her car that rainy night. In a dark suit and open collar, he looked every bit the headline version of himself, the young millionaire, whose company had changed the way people connected online. Yet when he smiled at her, it felt disarmingly genuine. "I did," she said slowly. Still not sure why. "Maybe curiosity," he said. "Or fate. Or guilt. You do owe me gas money." Grant laughed, offering his arm. "Come on, let me make it worth the trip." Quote. He led her through the hall, stopping before a series of modern art pieces. Some were bold, some abstract, but all celebrated stories of ordinary people finding extraordinary beauty in daily life. "These are from a project we fund," he explained. "Artists who use their work to inspire change." Mara's eyes softened as she looked around. "It is beautiful. I could stay here for hours." "Then maybe you should." He handed her a small card. "Our foundation is sponsoring a community mural project next month. They are looking for artists who want to teach kids. I thought you might be perfect." She blinked at the card, speechless. "You are serious?" "I am. And before you say anything, no strings attached." Her throat tightened. "Why me?" Grant looked at her for a long moment. "Because you care about things that most people forget to see. That is rare." Before she could respond, a reporter nearby called his name. Flashbulbs went off. People turned. The air shifted suddenly. She saw him not as the man in her car, but as the public figure everyone else saw. Grant Hale, the face of wealth and success, surrounded by investors and journalists. Mara stepped back. "You did not tell me this was your event." Grant turned toward her, startled. "I did not think it mattered." "It does," she said quietly. "You live in a world I do not even understand." He took a step closer. "You are right. But maybe that is exactly why I wanted you here." The music swelled. Cameras flashed. She felt eyes on her, whispers rising. For a second, she imagined how this scene would look to everyone else, a poor girl from Brooklyn standing next to a millionaire in his own ballroom. "I cannot do this," she murmured, shaking her head. "I should go." "Mara, please," he said, reaching for her hand, but she pulled away. "I do not belong here," she whispered. "Thank you for the invitation, but next time, find someone who does." Before he could answer, she turned and walked out into the night, her reflection disappearing against the glass doors. Outside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of rain. She stood under the awning for a long moment, clutching the small card he had given her. Then, slowly, she tore it in half, not out of anger, but fear. Fear of what it meant to start believing again. Inside the hall, Grant watched the doors close behind her, the sound of applause echoing for someone else entirely. He stood still, his chest heavy with something unfamiliar. For the first time in years, he realized that success had given him everything except the one thing that could not be bought, the chance to be understood. 2 days passed. The city kept moving, loud and bright, but Mara Ellis felt stuck in silence. The small art pieces she had been working on sat unfinished on her table. Her sketchbook lay closed. Every time she picked up a pencil, her hand froze. The image of Grant standing under the lights of that ballroom would not leave her mind. Her phone buzzed several times, unknown numbers, polite messages from his assistant, a single short text from Grant himself. "I am sorry if I made you uncomfortable. That was never my intention." She never replied. Pride was a quiet thing, but it kept her from answering. On Friday evening, Mara stopped her car in front of a small community center in Queens. She was delivering paint supplies for a local after-school program. Inside, laughter echoed from a group of children learning to mix colors. As she handed the supplies to the coordinator, she noticed a poster on the wall, Community Art Project, sponsored by the Hale Foundation. Her stomach twisted. She forced a smile, finished her work, and left quickly. Outside, the sky turned orange. She leaned against her car, looking out at the street. "Why do you keep showing up in my life, Mr. Wrong Car?" she murmured. That night, a heavy knock sounded on her apartment door. When she opened it, she froze. Grant Hale stood there, holding an umbrella dripping with rain. His suit was damp at the edges, but his expression was calm. "Mara," he said softly, "I did not come to argue, I just wanted to talk." She crossed her arms. "You have an interesting way of finding people." "I had to." "You were not answering your phone." "I was not planning to." He nodded, accepting that without anger. "Then consider this my last attempt." He held out a folder. Inside are the details for the mural project. "The coordinator asked me personally if I knew someone who would fit. I told them I did." She stared at the folder but did not take it. "You think you can fix everything with one more offer?" "No," he said quietly. "I think I can only fix what I broke by being honest." Gub. He stepped back slightly, the rain softening around them. "I was at that event because my foundation funded it. I should have told you. I did not because I wanted for once to meet someone who did not see me as a headline. You made me feel like a person again, Mara. That is all." Her heart tightened at his words, but her mind still fought against them. "You have no idea what it feels like to stand in a room full of people who look at you like you do not belong." He took a slow breath. "You are wrong. I have spent my whole life in rooms like that, pretending I do." The honesty in his voice disarmed her. Rain dripped from his hair, sliding down the side of his face. He looked nothing like the confident CEO from the news. He looked human, tired, hopeful, real. "I am not asking for anything," he said finally. "If you never want to see me again, I will understand. Just do not give up on what you were meant to do. The world deserves to see what you create." Quote. He placed the folder gently on the small table by her door, then turned to leave. "Grant," she called softly. He stopped, glancing back. "You really believe I could do it?" "I do," he said, his voice steady. "You have more vision than half the people I have met in boardrooms. You just need a little help, and I happen to be good at building things." For the first time in days, she smiled faintly. "You are stubborn." "I am consistent," he replied, smiling back. When he finally walked away, she stood there for a long time, the folder still resting on the table, the sound of rain fading into the distance. Later, she opened it. Inside were blueprints for the mural wall, a modest grant for materials, and a handwritten note at the bottom. "This is not a gift. It is an investment in what the world needs more of: color, hope, and you." Mara touched the note, her chest tight with something she could not name. She looked around her small apartment, the scattered pencils, the worn brushes, the half-finished dream, and for the first time, she felt something shift inside. She whispered into the quiet room, "Maybe this mistake was not so wrong after all." Outside, the lights of the city blinked against the wet pavement, and somewhere across town, Grant Hale looked out his office window, wondering if that small envelope had found its way into her hands. A week later, the sound of children's laughter filled the courtyard of the Queens Community Center. Buckets of paint lined the sidewalk, brushes dipped in bright colors, and the rough brick wall that once stood dull and forgotten was slowly turning into a canvas of hope. At the center of it all stood Mara Ellis, her sleeves rolled up, a streak of blue across her cheek, guiding a group of kids as they painted sunbeams and stars. The air smelled of paint and summer rain. For the first time in years, she felt exactly where she belonged. The project had officially begun 3 days ago. She had almost said no when the coordinator called to confirm her spot, but the handwritten note from Grant Hale had stayed in her mind. An investment in what the world needs more of: color, hope, and you. It had been impossible to forget. She dipped her brush into yellow paint and smiled at the youngest kid, a boy no older than 8. "That is perfect, Mason. Every wall needs a little sunshine. Are you going to paint too, Miss Mara?" he asked. She nodded. "I already am." As the sun lowered behind the buildings, a familiar figure appeared at the far end of the courtyard. Grant Hale stood quietly, hands in his pockets, watching her. He wore no suit today, just a gray sweater and jeans. No cameras, no reporters, no polished corporate image. Just him. Mara noticed him only when the children started whispering. She wiped her hands on a rag and walked over, unsure what to say. "You came," she said softly. "I promised I would," he replied. "Besides, I wanted to see how my investment was doing." She laughed under her breath. "Your investment seems pretty happy." "I can see that." His eyes moved to the mural. "It is beautiful, Mara." "Thank you," she said. Then after a pause, "For everything," he shook his head. "You did this. I just gave you a wall." Quote. For a moment they stood in comfortable silence, the evening light glowing warm on their faces. Then Mara said quietly, "You know, I thought I would never see you again after that night. I tore your card in half." Grant smiled faintly. "I know. Clara told me you asked for a replacement application instead. I took that as progress." She smiled back, the kind of smile that reached her eyes. "You are impossible to ignore, Grant. That is mutual," he said gently. "You make me remember what it feels like to build something that matters." Before she could respond, one of the kids ran up holding a dripping brush. "Miss Mara, can he help us? He looks like he can paint." Grant crouched down, accepting the brush with a grin. "I will try not to ruin it." The children laughed as he joined them, painting a crooked sunbeam beside Mara's work. For the first time, he felt free. No board meetings, no expectations, just paint and laughter. When the wall was finally done, the children clapped and cheered. The mural shimmered in the fading light, hands, hearts, and words written in bright paint. Dreams belong to everyone. Later, as the courtyard emptied, Mara and Grant stood side by side, looking at the finished work. The air was cool, filled with the scent of fresh paint and the quiet hum of the city at dusk. "It is strange," she said softly. "A few weeks ago, I thought you were a thief. And now?" She smiled. "Now I think you just stole my excuses." Grant chuckled, but his voice lowered. "Mara, I have spent years surrounded by people who wanted to be close to me for what I own, not for who I am. That night in your car, you saw me as a person first. I cannot forget that." She turned toward him, her eyes reflecting the painted light on the wall. "And what are you saying now, Mr. Hale?" "I am saying," he said quietly, "that I do not want this story to end as just a mistake." "One?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small keychain, the same model key as her old car, now engraved with tiny letters. "The best wrong car I ever entered." Mara's breath caught, laughter and tears blending at once. "You kept that?" "Of course," he said. "It is where this all began." She took the keychain gently, her fingers brushing his. "Maybe some mistakes are meant to happen," Grant smiled. "Then let us not fix this one." Quote, under the soft glow of streetlights, he leaned in, and for the first time, their world felt quiet. Two lives that had collided by chance now finding balance in something real. Behind them, The mural shimmered, and in the center of it, written in bright white paint, were three simple words: hope, color, love. The weeks that followed moved like sunlight across water, steady, gentle, and full of color. The mural at the community center became more than paint on bricks. It became a gathering place. Families came to take pictures, volunteers added new details, and children who had never held a brush before now came every weekend to paint beside Mara Ellis. Grant Hale visited often, though always quietly. He brought new supplies, helped clean brushes, and stayed just long enough to share a coffee or a laugh. It was the first time in years he had been part of something that did not appear on a company report. Every time Mara looked at him, she saw not the CEO from the magazines, but the man who had accidentally entered her car one rainy night and changed her life without meaning to. One Sunday afternoon, Mara found him sitting on the curb, watching the children chase each other across the yard. He had rolled up his sleeves and looked entirely at peace. She sat beside him, handing him a cup of coffee. "You are getting good at disappearing," she said with a teasing smile. "No cameras, no headlines, no shows." He laughed quietly. "It feels better this way. No performance, no mask. Just life." Mara took a slow sip, her gaze drifting to the wall. "I used to think success was about escaping where you came from. Now I think it is about transforming it." He nodded. "You did that. You turned a wall into hope. And you turned a mistake into something real," she said. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that said more than words ever could. Then Grant reached into his jacket pocket and handed her a folded envelope. "What is this?" she asked. "Open it." Inside was a proposal letter from the Hale Foundation. At the top, bold letters read, "Dream Van Art Studio, Mobile Program Expansion." It outlined funding for a traveling art van, exactly like the one she had once sketched in her notebook. Her breath caught. "Grant, this is my dream. It is our project now," he said softly. "You will run it. I will fund it. Together, we can take this beyond one wall." Mara's eyes glistened. "You really do not give up, do you? Not when it comes to something that matters." The wind lifted her hair as she looked at him, and for the first time, she stopped fighting the warmth she felt whenever he was near. She set the envelope down carefully, then spoke in a whisper. "You are making it very hard to keep my distance." He smiled, then stopped trying. Quote, the sound of laughter and paintbrushes filled the air as he reached for her hand. She let him. It felt simple, honest, and inevitable. That evening, when the courtyard emptied, Grant and Mara stood before the mural again. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the painted words, hope, color, love. He turned toward her. "You once said I gave you a wall," he said. "But the truth is, you gave me something I did not know I needed." She tilted her head. "And what is that?" "A reason to start over." Mara smiled softly, her eyes glimmering in the last light of day. "Then maybe we both found the right car after all." He laughed quietly. "The best wrong car I ever entered." As the city lights flickered on, they stood together beneath the mural, the echoes of children's laughter fading into the distance. It was not the end of their story, just the beginning of something built on kindness, courage, and a mistake that had turned into love. Months passed, and New York bloomed into early spring. The Dream Van Art Studio rolled through the city streets, its sides painted with vibrant colors and children's handprints. It stopped at schools, shelters, and small neighborhoods, bringing paint, laughter, and a promise of beauty wherever it went. Inside the van, Mara Ellis sat surrounded by sketches, tubes of color, and sticky notes from children who had written things like, "Thank you for letting us dream." Her hair was tied loosely, a streak of yellow paint on her wrist, and a quiet smile on her face. The once small dream that lived in her sketchbook had now become real, alive and rolling on four wheels. Grant Hale kept his word. He stayed out of the spotlight, letting Mara take the lead, though he visited often. Sometimes he helped carry boxes. Sometimes he stood quietly in the background, watching her turn art into hope. Every time their eyes met, the distance between their worlds seemed to fade a little more. One Saturday morning, the dream van parked beside the pier overlooking the Hudson River. Children ran around with brushes while parents watched from benches. Grant arrived carrying 2 cups of coffee and found Mara kneeling by a young girl, helping her paint waves on the side of the van. When the child ran off to show her friends, Mara looked up at him. "You are supposed to be the busy one," she said, smiling. "I cleared my schedule," he said, "for something more important." She took the coffee from him and laughed softly. "You still talk like a CEO, even when you are being sweet," he chuckled. "Old habits." Then his tone grew more serious. "Mara, can I ask you something?" She tilted her head. "Go ahead." Quote, "What if we took this further? What if Dream Van became a foundation national, maybe even global? I can handle the logistics, but I want you to lead it." She blinked, surprised. "That sounds impossible." Grant shook his head. "It sounded impossible when you painted that first wall, but here we are." Her voice softened. "You believe in me more than I ever did." He smiled gently. "That is because you taught me what belief really means." Gut. Before she could reply, a familiar voice interrupted them. It was Clara, Grant's assistant, approaching with a worried look and a phone in her hand. "Mr. Hale, there has been a situation at headquarters. The board wants you back immediately. There is talk of a merger, and they are questioning your priorities." Mara's chest tightened. "You should go," she said quietly. Grant looked at her, then at the Dream Van. "If they cannot understand why this matters, maybe I am sitting at the wrong table." Clara hesitated. "Grant, this could cost you your position." He took a deep breath. "Then I guess they will have to find another CEO." Mara stood speechless as Clara walked away, phone pressed to her ear. Grant turned back to her, his voice calm but sure. "For years I built things that made money. Now I want to build something that makes meaning. That is worth more than any title." Quote, her eyes shimmered with emotion. "You really would give it all up for this?" "For this," he said, his gaze steady. "And for you." The wind off the river lifted the painted ribbons hanging from the van, colors fluttering in the sunlight. Around them, the children's laughter rose again, bright and endless. Mara reached out, touching his hand. "Then let us build it together," she said softly. Grant smiled, and in that simple promise, everything felt right. The Dream Van gleamed behind them, alive with color and movement, a living reminder that some mistakes are not accidents at all, but beginnings disguised as chaos. And for the first time, both of them knew that their journey was no longer about chance. It was about choice. A month later, headlines spread across the city. Tech millionaire Grant Hale steps down as CEO to launch National Art Foundation. The media called it reckless. Investors called it emotional. But for Grant, it was simple. He had finally found something worth believing in. At the Dream Van headquarters, a converted warehouse filled with canvases, brushes, and laughter, Mara Ellis stood in front of a group of new volunteers. The space buzzed with energy, sunlight streaming through tall windows. On one wall hung the original mural from Queens, carefully recreated, its words shining proudly. Hope, color, love. Grant walked in quietly, sleeves rolled up, his hands stained with paint. "You are late," Mara said with a playful smile. "I was convincing the last board member to donate," he replied. "She cried halfway through the presentation, so I think we are good." The volunteers laughed, and the room filled with warmth. After the crowd dispersed, Mara turned to him. "You really did it," she said softly. "You left everything behind." "I did not leave," he said. "I just changed direction." He reached into his pocket and handed her a small velvet box. Inside was not a ring, but a tiny golden keychain engraved with their motto, Hope, Color, Love. "This is for you," he said, "the symbol of what we built. And maybe someday it will hold another key." Mara's eyes filled with quiet joy. "Grant, you have already given me everything I ever wanted. Then let me give you one more thing," he said, taking her hand. "A future, together." She looked at him, her smile trembling between laughter and tears. "You are still the man who entered the wrong car, and you are still the woman who turned that mistake into my greatest miracle." Outside, the Dream Van waited by the curb, ready for another journey. The sun spilled gold across the pavement as they walked toward it side by side, fingers intertwined. Their story had begun with confusion, fear, and a wrong turn. But now it moved forward with clarity, love, and purpose. Some mistakes, they both knew, were simply destiny in disguise. 1 year later, the Dream Van Foundation held its first national exhibition in New York City. The gallery was filled with paintings, photographs, and murals created by children from every corner of the country. The air buzzed with excitement, laughter, and the quiet hum of dreams coming true. In the center of the hall stood Mara Ellis, dressed in a simple white dress splattered with color. Her eyes glowed with pride as she looked around at the walls covered in light and life. It was everything she had once imagined in that worn sketchbook. Then she heard a familiar voice behind her. "You always said color could heal people," Hale said softly. "You never mentioned it could heal me too." She turned, smiling as he approached, holding something in his hand, a small silver ring shaped like a paint swirl. He looked nervous for the first time since she had met him. "Mara, I walked into the wrong car that night, but somehow it led me to the right person. You turned a mistake into a movement, and you turned my life into something real. Will you marry me?" Tears shimmered in her eyes as the crowd around them fell silent. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. 1,000 times yes." Applause filled the room. The children cheered, throwing small paper petals into the air. The mural behind them glowed under the lights, the words hope, color, love, shining brighter than ever. Grant slipped the ring on her finger, and together they turned toward the audience, their hands clasped, their smiles radiant. Their story had begun with a mistake, a rainy night, a wrong car, a misunderstanding. But it ended here, in a room filled with art and joy, where two souls who should never have met had found each other anyway. Because sometimes fate does not arrive with a plan. Sometimes it simply opens the wrong door and leads you exactly where you are meant to be.